Today we're joined by Joe Pinion, candidate for the 21st Congressional District, that special election that's coming up. Nobody knows exactly when so far, which makes campaigning a little bit tricky, doesn't it?
Well, look, I think the reality is that certainly many people have put their name forward for consideration. It's the honor of a lifetime for anyone to be considered to go down to D.C. and represent the people that call the 21st District home. I think for us, one of the things that we are trying to remind the local chairs of, we are the only potential candidate that has been on the ballot in all 15 counties. We won all 15 counties in 2022 when I ran for United States Senate against Chuck Schumer, the longest serving senator in the history of this state, and we won all 15 counties in the district. We are the only Republican to do so since Al D'Amato in 1998 of any of the people that have placed their name on the ballot for United States Senate. So we do believe that if you're looking for somebody who has demonstrated an ability to connect with the voters of this district, and more importantly, where 60% of the voters in this district have already said they trusted us to go to D.C. for a 6-year period, certainly we believe that we could be a valued standard bearer for the party in this upcoming special election.
Okay, well, you did turn in the closest result of a Republican for U.S. Senate in a long time.
Correct.
Against a very entrenched Democrat. Do you kind of wish you were running against him this year? He's been muddied up a little bit recently.
Well, look, I think Senate and Congress are two sides of the same coin. I do believe that there is a huge opportunity in this 119th Congress to do a great deal of good, not just for the country, but for the 21st Congressional District. When you look at the issues that are pertaining to the district and the issues that are at the top of the list for President Trump's agenda, there is so much overlap that having a strong advocate there could mean the difference for the next generation of people that call the North Country home. And so whether we're trying to have expansions of Fort Drum, trying to figure out how we can reconstitute the world that we tried to rebuild after the Cold War, where we shut down the military installations over in Oneida, we shut down the missile silos that we had over there in Clinton County. And now, as we see that opportunity for the Chinese Communist Party to start doing joint naval exercises with the Russian Navy, now we have the opportunity here to make North Country, in many ways, the tip of the spear to push back against any of those aggressions that could be coming from the Northern Arctic. The issues pertaining to the northern border, where we've seen per capita more people on the terrorist watch list walking into this country across the northern border as opposed to the southern border. So all of these things at the top of the agenda for North Country are in many ways at the top of the agenda for America, with the right leadership that can go to D.C. and be an effective advocate on the district's behalf.
All right, since we're on that topic, do you agree with all of President Trump's approaches to foreign policy, the hot spots like Ukraine and the Middle East?
Well, look, the reality is that you have to have not just a military plan, but also a strategic plan. The problem that we had with Ukraine, and much of this I spoke about when I ran for U.S. Senate against Senator Schumer, was that we did not have a long-term strategic approach. How are we going to support our allies in Europe to have them weaned off of their dependence on that Russian oil? We did not have a plan to make sure that we could have an Operation Warp Speed or something akin to it for energy, as it relates to things like natural gas, where we have an abundance of that could have been used to help our friends in Europe. I think if you look at many of the issues that Americans are talking about and what they voted for, the no tax on tips, the securing of our border, to make sure that we don't have people like our correctional officers all across North Country that are being fired from their jobs, mostly for political reasons, while at the same time the governor of our state is pandering to people who are being fired by those for the purposes of trying to have a federal government that actually works more in alignment for the people. So yes, I do believe that going down to D.C., you can try to insert the needs of the district directly into the agenda of the president. And I think there's a lot of overlap there. Even if you look at things like emergency services, it is not the job of the president to recognize that here in North Country, we do not have 360 degrees of coverage, that some of our emergency services do come from our friends over in Canada, that we do have have people in the logger business and people who are in the paper mill business that need access to the border. So it is the job of your representative to be that scout, to be able to go into the Oval Office and talk to the president, to speak with Speaker Johnson and say, yes, we have to stop this tired decade adage of Canada ripping off the people that call America home, but we can do it in a way that doesn't necessarily drop the hammer on hard-working Americans that call the North Country home, many of them who placed their trust in President Trump and the Republican Party in this 2024 presidential election.
Okay, sounds like you're looking slightly askance at the tariffs.
Well, look, I think the reality is that the job of the President of the United States and the job of the United States Senate is to have a long lens view for what is best for the perpetual success of our nation. It is the job of your member of Congress to try to put that long lens view into the perspective of the people that call your district home. You are the scout, you are the advocate. It is your responsibility to go down there and say, here is what is best for our country long term. Here is how we can marry that long-term vision with our short-term imperatives. That, to me, is what I would hope to do down in D.C., leaning on the relationships that I have with people down there that I've been able to interview in my capacity as a news
So the tariffs, good or bad?
Well, look, depends on which tariffs you're talking about. I think
the ones on Canada.
I think the ones on Canada have, in many ways, pretty much put Canada on notice that America is not going to be pushed around anymore. I think long term it's probably good for the country. Short term, I've got a lot of friends right now who are sitting with lumber yards full of lumber, trying to figure out the best way to get that lumber back to Canada or from Canada over here into Clinton County or Franklin County or St. Lawrence County. So there is short term pain. You cannot actually excuse that. And I think, again, part of the problem right now is making sure that we have somebody who can effectively go down there, speak on behalf of the district, explain these issues to the president. There is a way that we can do both at the same time. We can hold Canada accountable for ripping off American consumers, and at the same time, we can make sure that people making an honest living here in North Country get the support they need from the federal government to continue doing what they've been doing here in North Country for generations.
All right, you spoke about Governor Hochul's approach to the corrections officers, the one who struck and did not go back, firing them and kind of blacklisting them from future employment. You've been working with those officers?
Well, look, we've spent a great deal of time, as I've said. We didn't just wake up one day and decide that we wanted to go to Congress. Obviously, I ran for U.S. Senate against Chuck Schumer, but we've spent a great deal of time over the last 2.5, 3 years traveling this state. We've driven over 60,000 miles across North Country on behalf of the Republican Party. And in that time, we've had the opportunity to interface with great many of the correctional officers that call this district home. And for me, looking at what the governor has done, it is illegal, it is immoral. When you look at individuals that have been thrown off their health care retroactively, people that showed up at the Cleveland Clinic for treatment to get tumors on their brain dealt with, only to find out the governor had stripped their health care retroactively. That is monstrous. People who have liver cancer, who need a cocktail of pills to stay alive so they can soak up the last time they have with their family, with their children, kicked off their health insurance, prohibited from getting COBRA. These are not the actions of a woman that was trying to be a fair arbiter and get people back to the table. These individuals went on strike because they believed that the work conditions were unsafe. The data documents that the work conditions were not safe. When you have a 150 or 170% increase on inmate assault, you have an over 100% increase in inmate on correctional officer assault. That is the substance of a work environment that is broken. The fact that she has gone on to now try to black label some of these members, putting them on lists to say that they can never work for the state again, the political equivalent of you will never work in this town again, putting them on a list to try to revoke their peace officer status. That is pure and simple retribution that comes from the carnal heart, not the giving heart that the governor likes to claim that she has towards the people that call this state home.
Well, given where we are at this moment, what can be done in this situation going forward?
Look, I think it's very difficult because many of the remedies are legal remedies that are timely and they're expensive. And so for some people, it is going to quite literally cost them their lives as they try to wrestle with the state to try to get the health insurance that they are entitled to. There was a woman that I spoke to who was in the middle of IVF treatment. There is a $50,000 cap or a $25,000 cap, depending on what your insurance company is, over the span of your lifetime. To have that interrupted in the middle, in a callous nature that the state has done this, with no care or consideration for the fact that these are documented workplace safety issues, to me is monstrous. That's not the state that I was born in. That's not the state that I want to live in. The fact that Kathy Hochul has done these things just to me highlights why it is important to have a person in this seat that can speak and advocate for the district in a firm manner. It's not just the votes you take down in D.C. It's also the ability to leverage the limited bully pulpit that you do have as an elected official at the federal level to bring attention to issues like this one that are in dire need of greater attention.
You're a Yonkers native.
I was born in Yonkers, live in Saratoga, and so again, we just had a great opportunity here to figure out what we're going to do with our family. My fiance and I, we fell in love with Saratoga, and I think in many ways, sometimes things just line up in certain ways. I ran for U.S. Senate in 2022, didn't go the way we thought it was going to, but here we are with Congresswoman Stefanik, who went to D.C., the youngest woman ever elected in the history of our country, and is leaving to be one of the youngest UN ambassadors that we've ever seen. And so the NY-21 has enjoyed extraordinary leadership at the congressional position, and we just believe that given where things are right now in our life, this was an opportunity that we saw fit to put our hat forth, and again, up to the 15 local chairs to decide if we are worthy of being that standard bearer for the party.
Okay. Well, who is it do you think you need to impress or win over in order to win this nomination?
Well, look, I would hope that all of those chairs are listening to the voters. And for me, it is quite clear that every single voter in this district, most of them, has had the opportunity to weigh my qualifications. And to the tune of over 60%, they decided that they saw fit to send me to D.C. in 2022. I am the same man. I'm a wiser version of myself. I was a younger young Republican. Now I'm an old young Republican. But I do believe that we do possess the wisdom, the knowledge, the depth of experience that could be an asset to the district. I am certainly not the only person who has put their hat forward who can be a member of Congress. But I do believe this is a unique set of circumstances, that you are showing up for the job 7 months late. You do not have the typical 2 months where you get to hang out with your family, go through orientation. You win or you lose on that Tuesday, and if you win, you have the high honor of going the very next day to D.C. You get a 20-minute briefing, you get a pin, you get a card, and you are told to go vote your conscience. So under those circumstances, I do believe that having somebody that has had the opportunity in the field of journalism to interview probably half the existing Republican caucus in Congress, having somebody who has already run statewide, having somebody who for a living has had to be able to talk about issues in a manner that can resonate with the public. All of those things, I think, are critical when you're analyzing who is the best choice in this particular special election, which will be a 90-day sprint to the finish, where you can likely expect Democrats to pour a great deal of resources into the district, trying to convince people that their candidate is a better choice than ours.
Have you appraised the Democratic candidate so far?
Look, I don't know him personally. Certainly, I've met people in Saratoga and all across the district who know him personally, who know his family, who think that he is a fine young man. I would simply say that he can be the greatest individual imaginable. But in this modern Democratic Party, he will never be allowed to be the version of himself that can be a benefit to this district. This is a Democratic Party that turns its nose up at the people who do the unseen work. 14,000 correction officers went off the job to shine a light on the problem, to say that they were unsafe on the job. They couldn't find a single Democrat in Albany to stand up for those correction officers and say perhaps we should be analyzing why in the aftermath of HALT, assaults on these officers has gone up over 100%. 100%. And I would note that during that strike, that the person that has been chosen by the Democrats had very little to say about what needed to be done to help and support those correction officers. In fact, he was caught on a hot mic suggesting that some of those correction officers prior to that strike did not have much self-worth. So I think that sometimes what you say in the dark always does come to the light, and perhaps that is where you find out what people truly think about you. If you think that your neighbors are perhaps drunks and you think that your neighbors don't have self-worth, then maybe you don't find yourselves in a position to represent them sufficiently. So I think ultimately this race will be not about a Republican or a Democrat. It will be about the people of the North Country deciding who do they trust to advocate on their behalf. And for me, we believe that we have demonstrated in our commitment to showing up consistently. I looked every single county committee in the eye when I ran for U.S. Senate in 2022, and I promised them that if they put their trust in my hands, I would keep showing up, that I would keep fighting for the North Country. And I believe that we have kept that promise in thought, word, and deed. We've been at the Lowville Cream Cheese Festivals. We've watched America take back the record for the largest cream cheese we've ever seen. We've seen the Russians take the record back. We've seen America take it back, and now it's almost like 16,000 pounds of cream cheese. So I do think that when push comes to shove, hopefully the chairs will come to a decision and will be that choice.
What's been your interaction with those chairs so far? And do you think it's truly them who are going to make the decision, or is it two other people called President Trump and Elise Stefanik?
Well, look, certainly Congresswoman Stefanik has earned the right to have an opinion. I'm sure she will be calling the chairs and letting her voice be heard. And I think that the president, to this point, has kind of stayed out of it. He's got a pretty heavy dance card, to be sure, with all the things that are facing the country. But ultimately, yes, I think as a matter of the bylaws, it's the 15 chairs and make that decision. And certainly they'll be making that decision in concert with Congresswoman Stefanik. And I'm sure in concert, if not with the president, then certainly people who are speaking on behalf of the president. So, you know, it is one big stew here. Again, as us Republicans working together as a team to try and choose the standard bearer that gives us the best chance to hold on to this seat at a time when we are currently facing the slimmest House majority since World War II.
Do you believe among the party chairs, there's a list of finalists right now?
Look, I don't want to put words in the chair's mouth. I do believe that there is, we started off with, I think, over 30 people who had sent emails and expressed an interest in the seat. That was withered down, I guess, officially or unofficially to around 11 people. I do believe that in all sincerity, there are probably about 3 individuals that have a viable pathway to receiving over 50% of the weighted vote from those chairs. I believe we are one of those individuals. And ultimately, again, some of this is out of our hands and God's hands and the chair's hands and the party's hands. And all we can do is just keep reminding people of the fact that if you're asking yourself, what do you want from a member of Congress? You want somebody that you can trust to keep showing up once you've given them the responsibility. If they didn't show up for the correction officers, if they didn't show up for the clam bakes, if they didn't show up for the golf meets, if they didn't show up for the barbecues, if the first time they stepped in your county was to ask your county chair to send them to Congress, and that is not somebody that you can depend on to show up for you. That is certainly someone you can depend on to show up for themselves. And I think that perhaps with the exception of Senator Steck himself, who is a fine man, there is nobody who has put their name forward for consideration, who has spent more time in the North Country, who has spent more time hanging out at the Holiday Inns and the La Quinta Inns. In fact, we spent so much time at the La Quinta Inns. My fiance beat me up, and now we live in Saratoga full time. So, look, there's nothing quite as beautiful as this area. I think we need to have the conversation about the next chapter. The fact that we have a blight on the infrastructure of this country that is compromising our ability to keep the nation safe, and that's talking about the cell phone service that we have here all across the Adirondacks. We have the opportunity to tether some of that to what's going on with Fort Drum, with the military needs of this nation, to finally remedy that issue. You have to deal with the fact that, again, whether we're talking about immigration, whether we're talking about the economy, there are ways for us to to leverage federal dollars to deal with some of the holes and the gaps that we find here, dealing with things in a piecemeal fashion. So these are all things that I'm excited about doing if I'm given the opportunity and the honor to be the standard bearer in this race, and ultimately to be successful in this race and go down to D.C.
All right. Joe Pinion, thanks for coming in.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.